many people recognize this? Anybody? A few people. For those of you that don't, this is the infamous butterfly ballot. Now, it's named as such because candidates' names are on either side, like the wings of a butterfly, and it's got holes to punch in the middle. So it was used in the 2000 election when George W. Bush ran on the Republican ticket and Al Gore was on the Democratic ticket. Now, many people who wanted to vote for Gore saw his name as second on the left side, right? So George W. Bush and then Al Gore. So they punched the second hole in the middle. But actually, that's not the way that this ballot was designed. Pat Buchanan on the right is actually the second hole, so it kind of alternates left to right, left to right, left to right. Not surprisingly, Pat Buchanan received an anomalous amount of votes where this ballot was used.
Practically everything, actually. I mean, we think about voting in elections being a legal, civic process, but a lot of what makes voting in elections go smoothly has to do with design. Ballot design is probably the most important interaction that voters have with their government. You can make very small changes. You don't have to do a wholesale redesign of your ballots or your voting system user interface. You can make very small changes that make a very big difference.
Now, Dana was talking about design when we talk about something that we think of as the political process, right? So she's talking about voting and ballot design. Now, when a lot of us think about design, we generally think about something like this, right? We think about art. So when somebody says to you, hey, are you a designer? One of our general responses is usually, no, I don't know how to draw. Or how many people sort of think that, or how many people have had that response before? Nobody, all right, good, okay. But what Dana was talking about was she's talking about design in a very different way. This is my friend Jared Spool. He runs a usability consulting firm called UIE, and he's been designing things for 20 or 30 years. He helped design the first ATM machine, among many other things. And he has a really, really great definition of design that I love to use when I talk about what design means. He says, design is the rendering of intent. I love that. Design is the rendering of intent. Suddenly, design becomes much bigger than just pretty colors and picking fonts. Looking at design this way opens up many, many doors for everyone to be, and more importantly, to think like a designer. It's no longer relegated to somebody who just went to art school. This is an excellent book called Change by Design about this very concept. It's written by Tim Brown. And Tim Brown, in this book, he talks about this concept called design thinking. How many people have heard of design thinking before? Well, for those of you that don't know, this is the way that Tim Brown describes it in the book. He says, design thinking is a set of principles that can be applied by diverse people to a wide range of problems. So the same approach that a graphic designer uses to make a poster of, say, a punk rock show to appeal to a group of anti-establishment Gen Xers, it can be used to answer questions like, how can we bring clean water to remote villages in Africa? Or how can I increase tithing in my conference? It's the same approach. Now, Tim Brown, the author of this book, he's a CEO of a design company called IDEO. Now, IDEO doesn't just design logos and posters, at least not as the main output. They put design thinking to work for their clients. So as an example, they work with organizations like Team Rubicon, where military veterans use their skills to help in times of disaster. IDEO helped them make global efforts and knowledge sharing across their chapters more efficient, which allows their team to be more effective. That's design thinking at work. But they didn't design anything physical. They designed the way that the organization would work. They also worked with another organization called Quell to answer the question, is there a drug-free alternative to chronic pain relief? So out came this lightweight device placed in a sports band that delivers therapy for chronic pain by stimulating sensory nerves, which triggers the body's natural pain response, which blocks pain signals. Right? This is design thinking at work. Now, IDEO isn't the only one using design thinking to help organizations grow and help businesses thrive. Design thinking is used all over the world, and it's taught everywhere from art schools to MBA programs to everything in between. Now, great branding is a good example of design thinking in action. So let me tell you a story. There is a prestigious hotel chain that you may know of, and what they do is they give each member of staff $2,000 to spend on every guest. And the purpose of that $2,000 is just to help guests have a wonderful experience staying at the hotel. So they share stories like these. When they find out that it's a birthday of a person staying there, they put champagne and cake in sparkling cider and cake in the room when they found out about a birthday. Another example is that a laundry manager who couldn't get a stain out of a dress after trying twice flew from Puerto Rico to New York to replace the dress in person to the person who wanted to get it cleaned. My favorite is about a couple who stayed at this hotel, and they were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. So the staff charged them the original room rate from 50 years ago, $15 a night. Isn't that amazing? Any guesses as to what this hotel is? Okay, if you don't know, some people whispered it. This is their slogan. Ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Right, isn't that awesome? If you still don't know, it's the Ritz-Carlton. And that's their brand, that's part of their brand. Now, if we look at the things on this slide, neither of those elements are actually their brand. Those are just executions and expressions of that brand, right? So the logo, the lion head on the crown, that's not a brand, that's a logo. The slogan, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, that's not the brand, that's a logo, that's an expression of their brand. So what is a brand? There's this excellent book by Marty Neumeier called The Brand Gap, and he talks about what brand actually means. And I love the way that he describes it. He says, a brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or organization, right? That's a brand. When you think about Nike, what do you think of? Speed, athleticism, strength. When you think about organizations, what do you think about? That's their brand. When you think about Chipotle, what did you used to think about? You used to think about freshness and local and quality and fast food. And now, what do you think about? That's right. Those things are affecting their brand. So an organization isn't always in control of their brand, but they can try. So the question is, one of the reasons we're here today, what's the Seventh-day Adventist brand? It's an increasingly more urgent question for this group. What is the Seventh-day Adventist brand? What's a person's gut feeling about this organization? What words come to mind for them? Friendly? Righteous? Legalist? Vibrant? Wonderful? Maybe worst of all, Seventh-day Adventist. Who's that? So here's the good news. If there are any undefined or undesirable parts of the brand, we can actually use design thinking to help realign some of those things. We'll come back to this idea in just a few minutes, but first let's watch a video.
What can it be every child has access to an excellent education? If every child could study, learn, and interact with quality educational materials, the team at Eneza Education is dedicated to finding the answer to this question. Eneza is a team of educationalists and techies committed to increasing student achievement by spreading quality education to the most remote parts of Kenya and eventually the world. To do this, we leverage low-cost mobile technology, offering resources for students, teachers, and parents. Mobile phones have taken over, and we are focusing on what people already have access to.
Let me share an interesting stat with you. Listen to this amazing statistic. Out of 7 billion people in the world, 6 billion are cell phone subscribers. 6/7 of the world has cell phone access. The video that you just saw was from the educational nonprofit Eneza Education. They're a mobile platform that allows students to access quizzes, mini lessons, and tips and tricks on local content via the web, mobile web, and a USSD or SMS-based system. Now, so far, they have about 100,000 students at over 400 schools in Kenya and over 20 schools subscribing to their data. Isn't that incredible? They're using the ubiquity of mobile devices now to do something that would have been incredibly difficult prior. Just to put that in reference for you, let's take a look at a couple other facts. Consulting firm McKinsey estimates that the potential impact of mobile internet by the year 2025 is going to be $3.7 trillion to $10.8 trillion. That is a significant shift in the global economy just because of the advent of mobile devices. While we're at it, let's look at a few more. Now, this comes from the Pew Research Center. They say blacks, Hispanics, low-income Americans, less educated Americans, and young adults are more likely to be mobile-only users. Right? So when we think about the internet and the way that people use the internet and use the web, sometimes we think of people going to their desks and sitting in front of their desktop or their iMac or their PC or their laptop. Well, that is actually not true for a large number of the population. If you look at this audience, blacks, Hispanics, low-income Americans, less educated Americans, and young adults, it's no coincidence that that is a very big focus for every church on the planet, not to mention the Seventh-day Adventist Church. That is an audience that we are desperate to reach. And this is the way that they're accessing the web. 51% of black mobile internet users do most of their online browsing on their phone. 2 in 5 Latinos do most of their online browsing on their phone. Now, these groups are considerably less likely to own a desktop or laptop computer or have broadband connection at home. So it's not just that they prefer their phones, it's sometimes that's the only way that they can access the web. That is the internet for them. So for those of us that grew up in the desktop generation where you have a computer sitting at home on a desk, that is no longer remaining true. People are using the web only on their phones. That is what they know of the way that they access content. That is a dramatic shift in the way that we can distribute content too. And as an organization, every organization needs to take part of that and recognize that. And even more, this church can do that. Now, I apologize in advance for the lewdness of this example, but I think it makes the point strongly. This is a distribution map, what you see here, of millennial viewers per country for one of the largest porn sites on the internet. Notice anything interesting? One thing that jumps out at me is that there's almost nowhere on this map with no access. What that means is a hefty majority of the world can access porn if they want to. Now, if pornography can spread to the ends of the earth, why can't the gospel? Why hasn't the gospel done that? Perhaps no surprise, but what do you think the major access point is for this data? That's right, mobile. It's due time we put major effort and focus into reaching people where they are. Right? Related to that map that I just showed, 52.9% of millennials are accessing that data on mobile devices, and a slim 36% on desktop and 10.8% on tablet. That is a significant number. So we need to put major effort into reaching people where they are, and where they are is right in front of a glowing little screen of a supercomputer that fits in our purses and fits in our pockets. Fortunately, I think we can do something about this. My name is Dan. I run a small design collaborative out of Philadelphia. It's called Super Friendly. Now, one of the things that my team is really, really good at is helping organizations use design thinking to strengthen brands, and especially across digital products. One of the things that we use a technique called responsive design. And that makes sure that everyone can access content regardless of what device they have. If you haven't heard of responsive design before, it's just a fancy way of saying the site's pretty squishy, it's one site, and it fits into any screen size you had. Think of it like forcing Jell-O into a cup, right? It fits. It's just squishy, and when it has more room, it just bounces out. So we also design and build all of our responsive sites with a mobile-first mindset, which means that the first priority is catering to that previously discussed audience that's rapidly growing, the audience that I just mentioned to you. We've done that work for big tech companies, media organizations, publishers, startups, a ton more. We're currently working with a content network to do it, an Ivy League university, a consumer goods company to do the exact same thing. And we're not the only ones doing this. Does anybody know what this is? Has anybody seen this before? So this is this is actually one of the first digital style guides to go public. This was Starbucks style guide. So one day, a developer at Starbucks decided, I'm going to make our style guide public so that anybody can see how we build websites. And what you see there is all of the different elements that make up a website. He's got all those kind of sectioned out. So what does a border section look like? What does a two-up block look like? What does a float-based grid framework look like? And he has examples of each one of those in practice. A lot of organizations have followed suit and made their style guide and design libraries public. So this is Yelp's. You can go to this one. If you just Google Yelp style guide, you'll come up with this. Uber has one that's public, so you can check that out. Salesforce.com has one, which they've called the Lightning Design System. You can check that out. There's also huge organizations that are doing this. Google just released their design library called Material Design, and tons of designers and developers are using it to quickly build apps and sites. Perhaps one of the largest ones to date is that the US government actually has one that's public. They have a design standards library that we lightly consulted with them on. So one of the things that we're doing here is we're actually going to take that methodology and bring it to the Adventist church and actually do that project together. So the guts of that thing may end up looking something like this. So this is from the Salesforce style guide and design library. And this is their typography section. So if you think about it, you can think about it as like all the elements of your site. Think of them as like pieces of Legos. So you can build anything with Legos. You could build a forest, you could build a mansion, you could build a farm, but only if you have the right Legos in the case. So the project that we're undertaking is actually just figuring out what Legos we need in the case. So our project is to make sure that you have the right Legos, but instead of Legos, we call them patterns. And what we're aiming to create is not a redesign. We're not redesigning anything. We're not changing look and feel. We're not doing anything. We're just making sure that all these pieces are modular so that you can build what you want to build really, really quickly. We call that a pattern library, right? So it's a library of all the patterns that you'll need on your site. Now, those patterns could be things like navigation and typography and color palettes and buttons and all sorts of things. So you'll see, if you read down the left column, all of the things that you will need to build a website you catalog, you create a library of those things so that when you need them, you can just drag them right in and you just pull them over at the ready. Here's an example, another example from the Salesforce style guide of all the buttons that they have on the site. So if you need a blue button, here's the code that you write to create a blue button. If you need a red button, this is how you use it. This creates consistency around all the apps and the sites that they make. It makes ease of use for building these sites, and it just makes it a lot more consistent and a lot more friendly and a lot more user-friendly to users because you have a consistent interface that they can interact with all over the globe. The hope is that instead of taking months to build a site, and if you have the right patterns, you could build sites in weeks or days or even hours. This is just a screencast of me designing a site. This is for a client called Radio Free Europe, and we did a news site for them. And once we had a catalog of elements, it took literally seconds to build a site. When we're designing, so imagine this as like a mobile screen, and we're designing a news site. All right, I need the calendar thing. I'm gonna drag that in. We need the footer thing. Let me drag that in. A couple of secondary stories, a primary story. 30 seconds, a minute and a half to design a site. Once you have all the right building blocks. So the hard work goes into figuring out what are the building blocks, and then just using tools. This tool is actually Creative Cloud. It's part of Photoshop. It's called Creative Cloud Libraries. But there are many other tools for doing this in design GUIs and code, all sorts of tools, but this methodology sort of scales. And not only is it exclusive to websites, but this methodology extends to web and native apps and all sorts of other things like that as well. Though all the organizations I mentioned have different needs and wants, there's one commonality, which is the more time you spend building digital products, the more time you're neglecting your actual mission. The SDA Church's mission is not to build websites. I think we all know that. The SDA Church's mission is to share the love of Christ and prepare his people for his return, not build websites. So the easier we can make the website building part, the more effort you can devote to the prime objective. You don't need to spend 6 months building a website. Spend 6 days building a website and spend the remainder of that time focusing on the mission. So over the next few months, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working directly with the General Conference to understand what all of you need out of a global design system, out of a style guide, and out of a pattern library. We started a week ago by just talking to some of you. So some of you we've already talked to, just about what your needs are and what your wish list looks like for the way that you want to build these digital products in your unions and divisions and conferences and churches. If we haven't talked to you, and if you're not on a list and you want to talk about this, come find me afterwards. I'm happy to talk about it. I would love to talk to you about this stuff. There's a lot more that I can share, and there's a lot more that Brent can share, so find Brent as well. But we're happy to talk to anybody just to understand what you need out of this thing. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to pick a handful of use cases to start crafting this design system that makes, hopefully, some of your jobs easier, and that all that stuff will serve as a foundation for you to pull from, to contribute to, and to grow as a collective body of Christ. So what we're intending to do is not just make a thing, drop it on you, and say, good luck, see you next year. Really what we want this to be is the foundation that you can grow and you can use. And as you use it, start to contribute back to it. We're going to open source all of this stuff so anybody can use it and anybody can contribute back to it. I guess I'll leave you with one last thought, and then we can break for questions. It's this great verse in Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord. In even the small amount of interviews that we did, a lot of people said, our websites, our digital properties, they're not up to snuff. And there are myriad reasons for that. Not a lot of resources, not a lot of time, not a lot of expertise, not a lot of interest. But so let's take this digital product. Now we know that reaching millennials, reaching people on their mobile phones is really, really easy to do. We're just not doing it well. So in tackling that, let's do it with all of our heart and all of our mind and all of our effort as working for the Lord. Thank you very much.